"No gentleman would ever want you," Aunt Beatrice announced, holding up the physician's certificate that declared Eleanor incapable of bearing children. "Certainly not the Duke of Blackmere." A murmur travelled through the crowded drawing room. Eleanor Fairmont remained beside the fireplace, although every face had turned toward her. County magistrates, neighbouring landowners, and 3 trustees of the Fairmont estate had been invited under the pretense of discussing her approaching 25th birthday. Only now did Eleanor understand why her aunt had insisted upon so many witnesses. The certificate did not merely threaten her courtship with Duke Nathaniel Ashcombe, it could take away her home. Her grandfather's marriage settlement placed Briarwood Manor in trust for Eleanor, provided that she married and produced a lawful heir. If she were formally declared incapable of continuing the family line, Aunt Beatrice could petition the trustees to transfer control to her son, Frederick. Beatrice lowered the document just enough to display her triumphant smile. Dr. Silas Wren examined Eleanor himself. His conclusion is unmistakable. "He never examined me," Eleanor said. Silence replaced the whispers. Beatrice's fingers tightened around the page. "Grief has clearly disturbed your memory. My memory is perfectly sound. Dr. Wren asked 3 questions while you remained in the room. He did not touch me, take my pulse, or request any previous medical record." One trustee shifted uncomfortably. Another stared at the carpet. Eleanor crossed the room and held out her hand. "Let me see the certificate. You are in no condition to interpret it. My mother taught me to read household medical accounts before I was 12. I can interpret a physician's seal." The reference to her mother caused Beatrice's expression to harden. Lady Margaret Fairmont had died 8 years earlier after a sudden fever that no one else in the household had contracted. Beatrice had arrived to manage the grieving family and never surrendered control. Eleanor took the certificate before her aunt could withdraw it. The paper was new and expensive. Wren's signature curved across the bottom, followed by a crimson seal, impressed with a serpent wound around a chalice. Eleanor's breath caught. She had seen that design before. On the morning after her mother died, Eleanor had entered the bedchamber while the servants were removing the linens. A medical certificate had rested upon the writing table. She remembered the dark stain on its corner and that same serpent pressed into red wax. But Dr. Wren had not treated her mother. He had arrived after she was already dead. "Where did you obtain this?" Eleanor asked. Beatrice's smile disappeared. "Dr. Wren delivered it." "When?" "This morning." "That is impossible." The drawing room doors opened before Beatrice could answer. Frederick entered with mud on his boots and rainwater darkening the shoulders of his coat. He looked first at his mother, then at the certificate in Eleanor's hand. That brief glance was enough. Frederick knew what the document contained. Beatrice stepped between them. "The trustees will meet tomorrow at 11. Until they reach a decision, Eleanor will remain in her rooms. I am not your prisoner. You are an unmarried woman without an independent income. Briarwood pays for your food, your clothing, and every candle you burn. If the trust passes to Frederick, your continued residence will depend upon our generosity." Eleanor felt the humiliation strike, but she refused to let it bend her posture. "What generous future have you planned for me?" "A small cottage in Northumberland, somewhere quiet, where your unfortunate condition will attract less notice." "And the Duke of Blackmere?" Beatrice folded her hands. "His Grace has already received your letter ending the courtship." "I sent no such letter." Frederick moved toward the door. Eleanor blocked him. "What did it say?" "I wouldn't know. You knew what was written on this certificate before you entered the room. You also know about the letter." His gaze flickered toward his mother. Beatrice called for the servants. 2 footmen appeared. Both men Eleanor had known since childhood. Neither would meet her eyes. As they approached, Eleanor folded the certificate and slipped it into her sleeve. Beatrice seized her wrist. "That belongs to the trustees. It concerns my body, my reputation, and my inheritance. Until Dr. Wren answers for it, it remains with me." For the first time, fear showed beneath her aunt's anger. Then a crash sounded outside. A maid screamed in the entrance hall. Frederick ran to the window and pulled back the curtain. A riderless horse had reached the courtyard, its saddle streaked with blood. Tied to the bridle was a leather physician's case, bearing the initials S.W., Dr. Silas Wren's case. Beatrice released Eleanor's wrist. Another servant rushed into the drawing room, white-faced and breathless. Dr. Wren has been found beside the Western Road, he said. His throat was cut. Every person in the room turned toward Eleanor. Frederick pointed at the certificate hidden in her sleeve. She threatened him yesterday. I demanded that he withdraw a lie. Beatrice's fear vanished behind a look of cold calculation. And now the only man who could defend that certificate is dead. Hoofbeats suddenly thundered beyond the courtyard, fast, uneven, and approaching from the southern road. But before anyone could reach the window, the county constable entered with 2 armed men. "Miss Fairmont," he said, removing his hat. "Dr. Wren's appointment book states that he was to meet you at 9 last night. A witness saw a woman wearing your cloak leave his surgery shortly before midnight." Eleanor looked at the crimson seal showing through the edge of her sleeve. Someone had forged a diagnosis, forged a farewell to Nathaniel, and dressed another woman in her clothes. Whoever had killed Dr. Wren had prepared Eleanor's guilt before spilling his blood. The constable extended his hand. "I must ask you to surrender that certificate and come with me." Outside, the exhausted horse reached the front steps and collapsed. Duke Nathaniel Ashcombe had arrived, but he was already too late to prevent Eleanor's arrest. Nathaniel swung down from the saddle before the horse had fully stopped. Mud covered his riding coat to the waist. One glove was torn, and blood from a split knuckle had dried across his hand. He had changed horses twice during the night, but the final animal had nearly collapsed beneath him 3 miles from Briarwood. He entered the drawing room as the constable reached for Eleanor's wrist. "Take your hand away from her." Every head turned. Nathaniel's voice was low, but it carried the force of a command accustomed to obedience. The constable hesitated, then stepped back. Aunt Beatrice recovered first. "Your Grace, you have arrived at a most distressing moment. Eleanor has been implicated in Dr. Wren's murder. I know Wren is dead." Nathaniel removed a folded letter from inside his coat and placed it on the table. "I also know someone sent this in Eleanor's name." Eleanor recognized the neat slant of the handwriting. It resembled hers closely enough to deceive a stranger, but Nathaniel should not have been a stranger to her hand. Still, he had believed it. "What did the letter say?" she asked. Nathaniel met her eyes. "That you considered my proposal insulting. That you would sooner marry a stable boy than become the wife of a man whose family had earned its fortune through blood." A few guests looked away. The insult was carefully chosen. Nathaniel's father had enlarged the Blackmere fortune by supplying weapons during the war. Nathaniel carried a private shame over those contracts, though he had never spoken of it publicly. Only 3 people knew: Eleanor, Nathaniel, and Beatrice. "You believed I wrote that?" Pain crossed his face, but he did not evade the question. "Yes." The single word wounded Eleanor more deeply than an excuse might have. Nathaniel continued. "I believed it because my pride found it easier than asking whether the accusation was true. Yesterday, I received a second letter from a clerk at the posting house. He had noticed that the first was entered into the register 2 hours before Eleanor's carriage arrived in the village." Beatrice gave a dismissive laugh. "A clerk's error proves nothing." "No, but this does." Nathaniel unfolded the letter and held it near the fire without allowing the flame to touch it. A faint mark emerged across the paper, a crown surrounded by 6 stars. "The paper came from my private stationery cabinet." Eleanor looked toward Frederick. His face had lost its color. Nathaniel saw it too. "Only members of my household and invited guests could have obtained it. Frederick stayed at Blackmere Castle 3 weeks ago." "That is an outrageous accusation," Beatrice said. "My son attended a hunting party with 20 gentlemen and entered my study after midnight." Frederick took 1 step backward. "You cannot prove that. My valet saw you leaving." The room stirred with fresh whispers. Eleanor wanted to believe Nathaniel's arrival had changed everything, but the constable still carried an arrest warrant. Wren remained dead, and Nathaniel had already demonstrated how easily wounded pride could overpower his trust in her. She turned to the constable. "May I see the warrant?" He looked uncertainly at Nathaniel. "Do not look at him," Eleanor said. "The warrant concerns me." After a moment, the constable handed it over. Eleanor read every line. Dr. Wren's appointment book placed her at his surgery at 9. A woman in her cloak had been seen leaving shortly before midnight. More damningly, a silver button bearing the Fairmont crest had been found beside the body. She touched the front of her traveling cloak. 1 button was missing. Beatrice noticed. "You see?" I see that someone removed a button from my cloak." And who could enter your wardrobe? Anyone controlling this household. The servants lowered their eyes again. Eleanor studied the warrant more closely. The witness was identified only as a coachman named Thomas Bell. She knew every coachman employed within 10 miles of Briarwood. There was no Thomas Bell among them. Where is this witness? At the King's Arms, the constable replied, under guard. Then I will answer his accusation before the magistrate. Nathaniel moved closer. You are not going to the jail. I will not flee from a charge of murder. I can place you under my protection. Your protection? Eleanor repeated. Yesterday, you accepted a cruel letter as mine, without sending a servant to ask whether I had written it. His jaw tightened. I rode through the night to correct that failure. You rode here after discovering that your pride had been injured by someone else. That is not the same as trusting me. The words struck him into silence. Eleanor returned the warrant to the constable. I will come willingly, but the certificate remains with me until it can be copied before witnesses. Beatrice objected immediately. It is evidence. Precisely. Nathaniel glanced at the folded paper in Eleanor's sleeve. What certificate? My aunt claims Dr. Wren declared me incapable of bearing children. The exhaustion vanished from Nathaniel's expression, replaced by something colder. He made the same claim about my sister. Beatrice stared at him. Nathaniel explained that his younger sister, Lady Catherine, had consulted Wren 2 years earlier after suffering a fever. He had declared that she would never carry a child. Yet Catherine was now living in Bath with a healthy 6-month-old daughter. Eleanor removed the certificate and examined the crimson seal again. Did her document bear a serpent around a chalice? Yes. Do you still have it? In the Blackmere family archive. That gave Eleanor something she had not possessed moments earlier. Another certificate, another false diagnosis, and perhaps another intended victim. She asked for a sheet of paper. With the trustees watching, she copied Wren's statement word for word. Her attention caught on an unusual phrase, permanent constitutional incapacity. The same phrase had appeared in the report written after her mother's death. Eleanor looked at Beatrice. You kept my mother's medical papers. They were private. Where are they? I destroyed them years ago. A voice came from the doorway. No, madam. You ordered me to destroy them. Mrs. Hargreaves, the former housekeeper, stood with one hand gripping the doorframe. Beatrice had dismissed her the week before, supposedly for stealing linen. The elderly woman looked directly at Eleanor. I disobeyed. Your mother made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would protect the papers from this family. Beatrice crossed the room. This woman is a dismissed thief. Mrs. Hargreaves held out a small iron key. The records are hidden in the old still room, but someone tried to enter it last night. Eleanor recognized the key immediately. Her mother had worn it on a ribbon beneath her dress. Before she could take it, a musket cracked outside. The window shattered. Mrs. Hargreaves fell, and the iron key skidded across the floor, stopping beneath Beatrice's shoe. Nathaniel threw himself between Eleanor and the shattered window. Everyone down! A second shot struck the plaster above the fireplace. Guests screamed and crowded behind overturned chairs while the constable's men rushed toward the courtyard. Eleanor dropped beside Mrs. Hargreaves. Blood spread across the former housekeeper's shoulder, but she was breathing. Eleanor pressed both hands over the wound. Bring clean linen and hot water, she ordered. Not brandy, water. No servant moved. Aunt Beatrice still stood over the iron key, her shoe concealing half of it. Eleanor looked up. Move your foot. There is a gunman outside, and a wounded woman at your feet. Beatrice reluctantly stepped back. Eleanor snatched up the key and slipped it inside her bodice. Nathaniel dragged a heavy table across the broken window, while Frederick crouched near the wall, shielding only himself. The constable returned several minutes later. The shooter escaped through the orchard. We found hoofprints, but the ground is badly cut from the rain. Then search the western gate, Eleanor said. The orchard wall is too high for a horse to cross. Anyone leaving that way would need the gate key. Beatrice's gaze sharpened. You appear remarkably calm for a woman who has just survived an assassination attempt. The shot was not intended for me. Eleanor glanced at Mrs. Hargreaves. The bullet had entered high in her shoulder. Dangerous, but probably not fatal if the bleeding could be stopped. The gunman had fired only after the housekeeper revealed that she had preserved Lady Margaret's records. He had been trying to silence a witness. Nathaniel knelt beside Eleanor. Tell me what you need. Pressure on the wound. He removed his cravat and folded it against Mrs. Hargreaves's shoulder without hesitation. The elderly woman opened her eyes. "The papers," she whispered. "They are safe," Eleanor assured her. "No, not all of them." Her fingers closed weakly around Eleanor's wrist. "Blue ribbon, behind the third shelf." Then her eyes drifted shut. Eleanor checked her pulse. "She has fainted. We must move her somewhere secure." "The east guest chamber," Nathaniel said. "No," Beatrice replied quickly. "She is no longer employed here." Eleanor rose, blood staining her hands. "Briarwood still belongs to my trust until the trustees decide otherwise. Mrs. Hargreaves will receive care beneath this roof." One of the trustees, Mr. Alderton, cleared his throat. "Miss Fairmont is correct. Until tomorrow's hearing, Mrs. Beatrice holds administrative authority, but she cannot deny urgent medical assistance on trust property." It was a small victory, but Eleanor saw its effect. The servants obeyed her for the first time that morning. Mrs. Hargreaves was carried upstairs, under the protection of the constable's men. Eleanor instructed her maid, Rose, to remain beside the bed and admit no one except the surgeon summoned from the neighbouring parish. Beatrice watched every arrangement with compressed lips. "You are forgetting that you remain under arrest." "I have forgotten nothing." The constable appeared uncomfortable. "Given the attack, I am willing to postpone Miss Fairmont's removal until the house is secured. She will remain under guard." Frederick stepped away from the wall. "That gives her time to destroy evidence." Eleanor faced him. "Which evidence concerns you most? The certificate, my mother's records, or the witness who saw someone wearing my cloak?" He did not answer. Nathaniel moved closer to Frederick. "You were at Blackmere when my stationery disappeared. Your mother possessed information Eleanor shared only with me, and now you object, whenever she asks, to examine evidence. You cannot accuse me based on coincidence. I have not accused you yet." The final word carried a warning. Eleanor wished it comforted her. Instead, she remembered how Nathaniel had accepted the false farewell without confronting her. He could recognize suspicious behavior now because the deception had wounded his pride. Whether he would defend the truth when it cost him something remained uncertain. The constable placed a guard outside the drawing room while Eleanor washed the blood from her hands. Nathaniel waited near the door. When she finished, he said, "I meant what I told them, that you came to correct your failure, that I came to court you." She folded the blood-stained cloth. "You arrived with a declaration prepared before hearing my answer. I thought my presence would prove that you had chosen me." His silence confirmed it. "You believed a forged insult because it matched your fear," Eleanor said. "Now you want to repair everything with a grand gesture because that matches your idea of courage. Neither choice required you to ask what I wanted." Nathaniel flinched. Before he could respond, Beatrice returned with the trustees and announced that Frederick would assume temporary control of Briarwood's household accounts. "That authority is mine," Eleanor said. "And it was yours," Beatrice corrected. "The murder charge makes it improper for you to manage money or question servants. Frederick must protect the estate until the hearing. By transferring control to him, Beatrice could replace records, dismiss loyal staff, and enter every locked room in the house." Mr. Alderton hesitated. "Temporary supervision may be prudent. Then require 2 signatures on every payment," Eleanor said. "Frederick's and yours. Create a written inventory before any document is moved." Frederick's expression betrayed his frustration. The trustees agreed. Beatrice smiled, as if the restriction did not matter, but Eleanor saw her glance toward the clock. Someone was working against a deadline. The constable permitted Eleanor, Nathaniel, and 1 guard to enter the old still room. Beatrice insisted on accompanying them as the household administrator. The room had been locked since Lady Margaret's death. Its shelves still held dusty jars of dried lavender, feverfew, and willow bark. A work table stood beneath the single window, and faded labels curled away from glass bottles. Eleanor found the 3rd shelf. Behind it lay an empty space. The records were gone. Beatrice exhaled softly. "Your housekeeper lied." "No," Eleanor said. Dust covered the shelf, except for a narrow rectangular mark. Something had rested there until very recently. Nathaniel examined the window latch. "There is no damage. Whoever entered used a key." "Mrs. Hargreaves kept the only one," Beatrice said. Eleanor studied the floor. Near the wall lay a small wooden clothes peg wrapped with a thread of blue ribbon. It was an ordinary object, the sort servants used to secure linens on washing days, but the ribbon had not faded with age. Eleanor picked it up carefully. One end smelled faintly of cloves and lamp oil. She had noticed that scent earlier when Frederick entered the drawing room. Nathaniel noticed her reaction. "What is it?" Before Eleanor could answer, Beatrice took her son's arm. Frederick spent the morning inspecting the lamps. "Of course, he smells of oil." Nathaniel looked from the peg to Frederick. Doubt entered his expression, but then he nodded, accepting the explanation. Eleanor felt the old warning settle in her chest. Nathaniel was still willing to let a convenient answer end an uncomfortable question. She wrapped the peg in her handkerchief. Beatrice's eyes followed the movement. At that moment, a guard called from the corridor. The witness from the King's Arms had arrived to identify Eleanor. A frightened coachman was brought into the room. He looked at Eleanor only once before pointing at her. "That is the woman I saw leaving Dr. Wren's surgery." Eleanor stepped closer. "You are certain?" "Yes, miss." "Then tell the constable what colour my cloak was." The coachman's mouth opened, but no answer came. Eleanor glanced at Beatrice. Her aunt was no longer smiling. For the first time, she was looking at Eleanor not as a defeated niece, but as the one person capable of destroying everything she had planned. The coachman's eyes moved toward Beatrice before he answered. "Dark blue," he said. Eleanor touched the cloak, draped over the back of a chair. "Mine is green." "1." It was night. Colours looked different by lamplight. "Then describe its fastening." The man swallowed. "Silver buttons." "There are 12. How many did you see?" "I did not count them. Yet you saw one clearly enough to recognize the Fairmont crest." The constable frowned. The button was found beside the body. The witness did not mention seeing it. "Dut." Eleanor kept her attention on the coachman. His coat was too large across the shoulders, and fresh mud covered one boot, while the other was nearly clean. He had not walked through the wet courtyard. Someone had brought him into the house by the covered servants' passage. "Where do you work, Mr. Bell?" "I hire myself where needed." "For whom did you last drive?" "A merchant travelling north." "What was his name?" "I was not paid to ask." Eleanor picked up the clothes, peg wrapped with blue ribbon. "This was found where my mother's medical records were hidden. It carries the odour of cloves and lamp oil. Your right glove has the same blue thread caught in its seam." The coachman immediately closed his fist. Frederick stepped forward. "Half the servants in England use blue thread, but only Briarwood's laundry uses ribbon dyed with woad and fixed with clove oil. My mother developed the mixture because ordinary marking ink damaged fine linen." Eleanor had learned the formula beside Lady Margaret in that very room. At 13, she had believed they were merely preserving household sheets. Now that unremarkable lesson connected the missing records, the false witness, and someone with access to Briarwood's laundry. She addressed the constable. "Ask Mr. Bell to remove his glove." The coachman backed into the table. "You have no authority over me." "No," Eleanor said, "but he does." All eyes turned to the constable. After a tense pause, he ordered the man to show his hand. A fresh burn crossed the coachman's palm. Beneath the blistered skin were faint streaks of crimson wax. Nathaniel took Wren's certificate from the table and compared its seal with the mark. This man handled the sealing wax. Beatrice laughed sharply. "Or he burned himself sealing an ordinary letter. Then he can explain why he entered this room using the servants' passage," Eleanor replied. The coachman lunged toward the door. Nathaniel caught him by the collar, but the man twisted free and overturned a shelf between them. Glass jars shattered across the floor. In the confusion, Frederick grabbed Eleanor's arm and pulled her away from the falling bottles. The gesture appeared protective. Then Eleanor felt his fingers searching the folds of her sleeve. He wanted the certificate. She drove her heel down on his boot and tore herself free. The constable's men seized the coachman in the corridor. As they dragged him back, a folded banknote fell from his pocket. Mr. Alderton picked it up. Someone had written a payment reference along its edge, F.B., final service upon confirmation. Frederick Beatrice's son shared those initials. So did 3 other men employed on the estate. The notation suggested guilt, but did not establish it. "Who paid you?" the constable demanded. The coachman stared at the floor. Beatrice approached him with deliberate calm. "You should answer. An innocent household has been subjected to enough distress." It sounded like encouragement, but Eleanor heard the threat beneath it. The man's face tightened. "Mrs. Hargreaves paid me." Eleanor nearly laughed at the desperation of the lie. The coachman continued. She wanted Dr. Wren dead because he knew she had stolen Lady Margaret's jewellery. Miss Fairmont promised to protect her. "You claimed you saw me leaving Wren's surgery," Eleanor said. "Now you claim I arranged his murder with my former housekeeper. Which lie were you paid to tell?" The constable ordered his men to take the coachman to a locked chamber. As he was led away, the man turned toward Eleanor. "You should have accepted the cottage." Beatrice went pale. Eleanor had told no one outside the drawing room about the cottage in Northumberland. The coachman could only know of it through someone who had heard Beatrice's offer or helped devise it. The constable looked at her aunt. "I will need a list of everyone present when that arrangement was discussed." Beatrice recovered quickly. "Half the servants were within hearing distance. Then none will leave Briarwood until questioned." Frederick's temporary control of the household had been intended to open every door to him. Instead, Eleanor had forced the constable to seal the estate around the conspirators. It was another small victory, but it made the danger more immediate. The surgeon arrived before noon and successfully removed the ball from Mrs. Hargreaves's shoulder. She remained unconscious, but was expected to live. Eleanor returned to the still room with Mr. Alderton and Nathaniel. If the medical papers had been removed recently, they might still be inside the house. She examined the shelves rather than searching at random. Her mother had arranged remedies according to use: fever treatments to the left, digestive preparations in the center, and dangerous substances inside a locked cabinet. One bottle stood in the wrong place. Eleanor lifted it. The label read tincture of cloves, but the bottle contained nothing except a tightly rolled strip of paper. Nathaniel watched as she drew it out. It was not a medical record. It was a list of 6 women, each identified by initials, date, and payment. Beside 4 names, Dr. Wren had written the same phrase used on Eleanor's certificate: permanent, constitutional incapacity. Nathaniel pointed to the second entry: C.A. That is Catherine Ashcombe, his sister. The final set of initials was Eleanor's, followed by the date of the trustee's hearing: tomorrow. Someone had paid Wren to issue false diagnoses against women whose marriages or inheritances depended upon producing children. At the bottom of the list appeared another notation: upon transfer of Briarwood, all original certificates to be surrendered to B. Beatrice, Nathaniel said. "Perhaps," Eleanor answered, "but a single initial is not proof." He stared at her. "You defend her after everything she has done?" "I am protecting the truth from the same weakness that allowed you to condemn me. A suspicion is not a verdict." Nathaniel lowered his eyes. Eleanor handed the list to Mr. Alderton so its discovery and custody could be witnessed. Her own triumph lasted only a moment. The still-room door slammed shut. A key turned from the other side. Then the unmistakable smell of smoke began seeping through the floorboards. Someone had set fire to the room directly beneath them. Nathaniel threw his shoulder against the door, but it held. Eleanor rushed to the window. Iron bars, installed after thieves had once stolen medicinal spirits, blocked their escape. Flames appeared between the floorboards. Through the rising smoke, Eleanor saw something tied beneath the work table, a broken length of blue ribbon leading to a small glass jar. The same ribbon from the clothes peg. Someone had not merely removed the records. They had prepared the still room to burn with Eleanor inside it. Eleanor tore open the nearest cupboard and searched among the bottles. "Stop!" Nathaniel shouted. "The spirits will feed the fire. That is why I am not looking for spirits." Smoke thickened around them. Mr. Alderton coughed into his sleeve, while Nathaniel struck the door again with a brass mortar. Eleanor found a jar of alum powder and emptied it into the basin beneath the water pump. Her mother had used the mixture to treat scorching on household fabrics. It would not extinguish the fire, but it could slow the flames long enough to clear and escape. "Take off your coat," she told Nathaniel. He obeyed without questioning her. Eleanor soaked it in the alum water and pushed it against the burning floorboards. The flames retreated beneath the heavy wool. Mr. Alderton pointed toward the ceiling. "There is no way out. There is a delivery hatch behind that cabinet." Nathaniel dragged the cabinet aside. A narrow wooden panel appeared in the wall, nearly invisible beneath faded paper. Years ago, apothecaries had passed crates through it without carrying dangerous substances through the house. The opening was barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. Eleanor pushed Mr. Alderton toward it. "You, first. Take the list." He slipped the document inside his coat and crawled into the dark passage. Nathaniel lifted Eleanor toward the opening. You go next. The floor will collapse. Then stop arguing. She caught the edge of the hatch and pulled herself inside. Nathaniel followed as fire consumed the work table behind him. They crawled through dust and suffocating heat until Mr. Alderton kicked open a panel in the pantry wall. Servants dragged them out moments before the still-room windows burst. Eleanor collapsed onto the stone floor, struggling for breath. Nathaniel knelt before her and gripped her shoulders. Are you hurt? She shook her head. He pulled her against him before she could object. For one unguarded moment, Eleanor felt his body trembling. He had ridden through the night, entered a house filled with accusations, and nearly burned beside her. Then Beatrice's voice cut through the pantry. What have you done? She stood beyond the servants with Frederick and the constable. Her expression suggested that Eleanor, not the hidden attacker, had set the blaze. Nathaniel rose. Someone locked us inside and ignited the room. Or Eleanor burned the records because they proved Dr. Wren's diagnosis. Mr. Alderton reached inside his coat. His hand emerged empty. The list, he whispered. Eleanor turned toward him. You had it in the passage. I placed it here. A clean cut divided the inner pocket of his coat. Someone had removed the paper while the servants pulled him from the hatch. Frederick looked toward the crowded doorway. Any one of them could have taken it. No one leaves this pantry, the constable ordered. A search produced no list. Beatrice folded her arms. How convenient. Eleanor claims to discover evidence proving her innocence, but it vanishes before anyone except her admirers can read it. I read it, Mr. Alderton said. You inhaled smoke and nearly lost consciousness. I saw my sister's initials, Nathaniel added. Beatrice looked directly at him. You rode here intending to marry Eleanor. Your judgment is hardly impartial. The accusation found its mark. Nathaniel's face hardened. Eleanor saw what would happen before he spoke. Beatrice had challenged his honor, and his pride was already reaching for a grand answer. Nathaniel, she warned. He stepped into the entrance hall, where the guests and remaining trustees had gathered. My judgment was impaired when I believed a forged letter, instead of confronting the woman who supposedly wrote it. Beatrice's expression became almost expectant. Nathaniel turned to Eleanor. Before everyone present, I renew my offer of marriage. Become the Duchess of Blackmere, and no false physician, corrupt trustee, or grasping relative will take your home from you. The hall fell silent. It was the dramatic act of devotion society expected from a duke. Several guests looked at Eleanor as if her rescue were complete. But Nathaniel had not asked what she needed. Worse, he had publicly connected her defense against murder to his desire to marry her. Beatrice could now claim that every witness supporting Eleanor had been influenced by the promise of ducal favor. Eleanor held his gaze. I will not exchange my aunt's control for yours. Shock moved across the room. Nathaniel lowered his voice. That is not what I am offering. You decided to court me before asking whether I wrote the letter. Now you have proposed before asking whether marriage protects or endangers my inheritance. Mr. Alderton's face changed. He hurried toward the library and returned with the Fairmont settlement. After several minutes of reading, he found a clause buried in the final pages. If Eleanor entered an engagement or marriage while subject to a criminal accusation, control of Briarwood would pass temporarily to her nearest male relation until the charge was resolved. The provision had originally been intended to prevent a fortune hunter from exploiting a vulnerable heiress. Nathaniel's public proposal and Eleanor's failure to reject him immediately in formal terms could be presented as evidence of an engagement. Frederick was her nearest male relation. Beatrice had provoked Nathaniel into giving her exactly what she needed. I did not know about the clause, he said. You did not ask, Eleanor replied. Beatrice turned to the trustees. For the protection of Briarwood, Frederick must assume full temporary authority immediately. Mr. Alderton objected. The existence of an engagement is disputed. His Grace made the offer before witnesses. Eleanor did not issue a formal refusal. I refuse it now, Eleanor said. Beatrice smiled, after being informed of the consequence. The other trustees whispered among themselves. Finally, they agreed that the matter would be decided at the hearing the next morning. Until then, Frederick would receive the keys to the estate offices, but could remove nothing without a trustee present. It was a restriction, yet it gave him access. Nathaniel took a step toward Eleanor. I was trying to protect you. That is the danger. You keep acting for me before listening to me." The constable interrupted them. A rider had arrived from the magistrate's office with new evidence. Dr. Wren's missing appointment ledger had been found inside Eleanor's carriage. Between its pages lay one of Lady Margaret's sapphire earrings, lost on the night of her death. The magistrate had withdrawn permission for Eleanor to remain at Briarwood. She was to be taken into custody immediately. As the constable fastened iron restraints around Eleanor's wrists, Frederick accepted the ring of estate keys. Nathaniel's public proposal had not saved her. It had placed both her freedom and her mother's hidden records within her enemy's reach. The constable led Eleanor toward the waiting carriage as rain began to fall. Nathaniel followed them down the steps. "I will ride beside her. You will do no such thing," Eleanor said. He stopped. The iron restraints cut into her wrists, but she refused to let the assembled guests see her struggle. If Nathaniel accompanied her, Beatrice would use his presence as further proof that a powerful duke was interfering with the investigation. Eleanor faced the constable. "Seal my carriage before anyone removes the ledger. Record where it was found and who first touched it. The magistrate has already taken possession of it. Then record that I requested a proper account of its custody." The constable nodded. Nathaniel came closer, keeping his voice low. "Tell me what I can do. Listen before acting." "I am listening now. Return to Blackmere, find your sister's certificate, and every record connected to Dr. Wren's visit. Bring them to tomorrow's hearing with someone who can confirm where they have been kept." "I will. Do not give them to a messenger. Do not tell Beatrice what you find, and do not make another declaration on my behalf. Do not. Pain crossed his face. "You have my word." Eleanor entered the carriage alone. As it moved away from Briarwood, she looked through the rain-streaked window. Beatrice stood beneath the portico, while Frederick held the estate keys. Neither appeared concerned about the murder investigation. They had gained what they wanted. The county jail occupied the rear of the old courthouse. Eleanor was placed in a narrow stone cell containing a wooden cot, a basin, and one barred window too high to reach. The constable removed her restraints. "I do not believe you killed Dr. Wren," he said, "but you believe the evidence requires my imprisonment. I believe someone has gone to considerable trouble to make guilt appear certain. That person now controls Briarwood." The constable hesitated. "Frederick has temporary access, not ownership. Access is all he needs." Eleanor asked him to place a guard outside Mrs. Hargreaves's chamber and another at the estate office. He could spare only one man. "Protect Mrs. Hargreaves," Eleanor decided. "Documents can be replaced. A witness cannot." It cost her the records, but she would not purchase evidence with another woman's life. Before the constable left, Eleanor asked to see the appointment ledger. The magistrate ordered it sealed until the hearing. "Then allow me to see my mother's earring. That is sealed with it." She studied his expression. He was not dishonest, merely obedient to procedures someone else understood well enough to exploit. "Who delivered the ledger?" "Frederick found it beneath the rear seat of your carriage. Mr. Alderton witnessed its removal." "And who searched the carriage after Dr. Wren's murder?" The constable's brow furrowed. "One of my men." "Did he find the ledger?" "No." "Then it appeared after the first search." The constable understood the implication. Frederick had obtained the estate keys only after Nathaniel's proposal. Those keys included the carriage house. Nathaniel's attempt to protect her had given Frederick the opportunity to plant the evidence that sent her to jail. The consequence was no longer theoretical. It had closed a cell door behind her. At Briarwood, Frederick used his temporary authority before the rain had stopped. He dismissed the coachman responsible for Eleanor's carriage, replaced 2 clerks in the estate office, and ordered the account cabinets opened. Mr. Alderton objected, but the settlement permitted a temporary controller to inspect financial records. By evening, 3 tenant families received notices claiming they owed years of unpaid rent. The papers carried Eleanor's signature. They were forgeries. The first family was removed from its cottage before sunset. A boy named Samuel ran through the rain to the courthouse, carrying one of the notices beneath his coat. His father had worked Briarwood's southern fields for 20 years, and Eleanor had personally arranged reduced rent after an accident left him unable to walk. Samuel pressed the document between the cell bars. "They said you ordered it, miss." Eleanor read the notice. The handwriting imitated hers, but the rent figures were wrong. Briarwood's accounts recorded payments using an old system inherited from her grandfather. Pounds in black ink, produce credits in green, and labor exchanged for rent in blue. The forged notice listed everything in black. Whoever created it had seen recent totals, but did not understand how Eleanor maintained the accounts. "Where is your family now?" "In the church porch." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. She had promised herself that Briarwood would never punish a tenant for injury or illness. Now her name was being used to carry out the very cruelty she had prevented for years. She looked at the constable. "I need paper." He brought her a sheet and ink. Eleanor wrote a short statement declaring the eviction notice false and citing the page where the genuine labor credits had been recorded. Her signature alone might no longer be enough, so she asked the constable and the courthouse clerk to witness it. "Take this to Mr. Alderton," she told Samuel. "Do not return to Briarwood alone." The boy folded the statement carefully. Before leaving, he slipped something through the bars. "I found this near our door." It was a small scrap of blue ribbon. One end had been tied into a loop, exactly like the ribbon attached to the clothes peg in the still room. The ribbon was not merely used in the laundry. Someone had used pieces of it to mark particular places or documents. "Did you see who left it?" "A man from the house came before the eviction. He tied it to our gate and rode away." "What did he look like?" Samuel described a dark coat, a narrow face, and a burn across the right hand. "The false coachman." The man the constable had supposedly locked inside Briarwood. Eleanor called for him immediately. The constable returned, half an hour later, with grim news. During the fire, one of the new guards had been ordered to move the prisoner to an outside storehouse. By the time they checked the room, he had escaped. Who gave the order? The note carried Frederick's signature. Frederick would claim it had been forged, just as Eleanor's had been forged on the eviction notices. The conspirators were creating so many false documents that truth itself would soon appear impossible to establish. But the blue ribbon gave Eleanor a different path. A written order could be imitated, a household method could not. She held the ribbon beneath the cell's oil lamp. The clove scent was stronger on one side than the other. Mixed into the dye were tiny grains that flashed pale beneath the light. Salt. Her mother had added salt to certain ribbons, not to mark linen, but to identify cloth exposed to medicinal vapors. The ribbons had once been tied around bottles containing dangerous preparations. If salt crystals were still present, this piece had come from the locked poison cabinet in the old still room. The cabinet Beatrice claimed had remained unopened for 8 years. Eleanor now understood why her mother's death certificate, Wren's false diagnoses, and the blue ribbons were connected. Someone had used Briarwood's medicinal supplies to control which women could marry, inherit, or bear children, and Dr. Wren had provided the documents afterward. The church clock struck 8. Only 15 hours remained before the trustees' hearing. Then the constable appeared with a sealed message from Blackmere. Nathaniel had found his sister's certificate. He had also discovered that every medical record associated with it had been removed from the archive less than an hour before his arrival. The withdrawal ledger named the person who had taken them. Nathaniel Ashcombe. His own signature appeared beside the entry. Eleanor read the message twice. Nathaniel's signature appeared in the Blackmere withdrawal ledger, yet he denied removing the records. If the mark was forged, the conspirators had gained access to 2 noble households and understood their private systems well enough to imitate both. If Nathaniel had taken them and forgotten or concealed why, then Eleanor had trusted him with her defense too soon. She folded the message. "I need to speak with the Duke before the hearing." "He is already riding back," the constable said. "He also sent word that Lady Catherine is coming from Bath." That mattered more than another document. Catherine could testify about Wren's false diagnosis and produce the living contradiction to it, her daughter. Eleanor asked whether she might receive visitors in the courthouse interview room. After her cooperation during the investigation, the constable agreed, provided the door remained open and a guard stayed within sight. It was not freedom, but it gave her a place to act beyond Beatrice's control. She summoned Samuel, Mr. Alderton, and the parish clerk. Then she requested every available copy of Briarwood's rent notices from the previous 5 years. While she waited, she arranged the facts in 3 columns: documents known to be genuine, documents suspected of forgery, and actions that could not be explained by paper alone. The false courtship letter came from Nathaniel's private stationery. The medical certificate carried Wren's genuine seal. The eviction notices imitated Eleanor's signature. The archive ledger blamed Nathaniel. Someone wanted the investigation trapped inside handwriting disputes. If every signature could be challenged, none would be decisive. Eleanor placed the blue ribbon in the third column. Its dye, salt, and clove oil could not accuse a particular person, but they revealed where the conspirators had obtained their materials. Mr. Alderton arrived carrying an armful of account books. Samuel followed with the parish clerk. "The southern tenants have been returned to their cottage," Alderton said. "Your witness statement forced Frederick to suspend the eviction. Eleanor's first small victory outside Briarwood had held. Has he issued other notices?" 11. Bring every family to the church before the hearing. The parish clerk can compare their notices against the rent register. Alderton lowered his voice. "Frederick has ordered the estate books burned after midnight. He claims they were exposed to smoke and may be contaminated. He intends to destroy the only records showing that those families paid. We cannot remove them without his permission. Then do not remove them. Copy the colored entries in front of 2 witnesses. If he burns the originals afterward, the destruction itself becomes evidence." Eleanor turned to Samuel. "Can you return to Briarwood without being noticed?" The boy nodded. "Do not enter the house. Find the laundry women and ask which one prepared blue marking ribbon during my mother's final illness." Samuel left by the rear passage. Eleanor did not send him into danger. He would remain among servants who had known him since infancy, while Alderton and the parish clerk worked openly under the trustee's authority. By midnight, the courthouse interview room had become an improvised office. Copies of rent credits covered the table. 2 tenants gave statements confirming that the false coachman had tied blue ribbon to their gates before eviction notices appeared. The ribbon marked targets, but why those particular families? Eleanor compared their names with an old drainage map. All 11 cottages stood along the eastern boundary of Briarwood, beside an abandoned road leading toward Dr. Wren's surgery. If the families were removed, wagons could cross the land unseen. Her aunt was not merely trying to gain the estate. She needed the route cleared before morning. Nathaniel arrived shortly after 1, carrying Catherine's certificate inside a locked metal case. He looked even more exhausted than before. This time, he did not begin with a declaration. "What would you like me to do?" he asked. The change was small, but deliberate. "Place the case on the table. Keep the key until the constable and Mr. Alderton are present." When both men had witnessed the opening, Nathaniel removed the certificate. It used the same paper, the same crimson seal, and the same phrase as Eleanor's document. The 2 certificates had been written 2 years apart, yet the ink had aged identically. "They were prepared at the same time," Eleanor said. Nathaniel examined them. Then Wren kept blank certificates bearing his seal and completed them when required. Or someone else completed them. The constable inspected the edges. A tiny puncture appeared in the same corner of both sheets. Eleanor recognized it. Her mother used to bind batches of household documents by passing blue ribbon through a small hole. These certificates had once belonged to the same bundle. "How did Catherine's certificate enter your archive?" Eleanor asked. "My steward deposited it after Wren's visit." "Is he still employed by you?" Nathaniel's expression tightened. "Yes." "Who controls access to your stationery cabinet?" "My steward." "And who maintains the archive ledger?" "He does." The truth settled heavily between them. The same man could have supplied Nathaniel's paper, forged the withdrawal entry, and removed Catherine's medical records. "Why would your steward help my aunt?" Eleanor asked. Nathaniel sat across from her. "Because he is not merely my steward." Years earlier, Nathaniel's father had acknowledged the man privately as his illegitimate son, but had left him neither title nor property. Nathaniel had kept him employed out of guilt, granting him access to accounts, correspondence, and family records. "I knew he resented me," Nathaniel admitted. "I told myself loyalty would follow generosity. You gave him authority because it allowed you to avoid confronting what your father had done." "Yes, and when I warned you that information from your house was reaching my aunt, I thought you distrusted him because of his birth." Eleanor remembered that conversation. Nathaniel had accused her of snobbery and ended it before she could explain that 3 sealed letters had been opened and closed again. "You chose the interpretation that protected you from an unpleasant truth." He did not defend himself. My steward supplied the tools, Nathaniel said, but Beatrice designed the attack against you. Both can be true. Neither excuses your choices. I know. The simplicity of his answer surprised her. Nathaniel then placed a signed document on the table. He had dismissed the steward, surrendered his private correspondence for examination, and withdrawn from consideration for a royal appointment because the position would have allowed him to influence the magistrate. It was a costly action, but Eleanor understood what it was not. It was not forgiveness. She laid out her conditions. Nathaniel would testify only to facts he personally knew. He would not speak for her, interrupt her questioning, or offer marriage as a solution. Catherine's certificate would remain in the constable's custody. He agreed to every term. Samuel returned just before dawn. One laundry woman remembered preparing 12 lengths of blue ribbon during Lady Margaret's final illness. Beatrice had said the ribbons were needed to secure medicine bottles for transport. Only 11 scraps had appeared at tenant cottages. The 12th had been tied around a small black bottle removed from Lady Margaret's room on the night she died. Mrs. Hargreaves had hidden that bottle with the medical papers. Samuel handed Eleanor a note from the wounded housekeeper. She had regained consciousness and revealed its location, inside the hollow base of Lady Margaret's sewing box. The sewing box now stood in Frederick's newly opened estate office. Nathaniel immediately rose. Eleanor stopped him. You will not rush into Briarwood. Then how do we retrieve it? We do not steal it. We require Frederick to produce it at the hearing. If he destroys the bottle first, he does not know where it is. A knock sounded at the courthouse door. A messenger delivered an inventory Frederick had filed after opening the estate office. Among the items listed was Lady Margaret's sewing box. Its contents were recorded as needles, thread, and 12 lengths of blue ribbon. Frederick had found the hidden compartment. At that moment, smoke appeared above the eastern hills. Samuel ran to the window. A wagon was burning on the abandoned road, beside the evacuated cottages. Frederick stood nearby with Beatrice and Nathaniel's former steward. Inside the flames, glass shattered. The last bottle connected to Lady Margaret's death had just been destroyed. Eleanor watched the smoke rise until the first church bell announced 6 o'clock. 3 hours remained before the hearing. Nathaniel reached for his coat. We may still recover something from the wagon. If you ride there, they will claim you planted whatever is found. He stopped, forcing himself to listen. Eleanor turned to the constable. Send men who have no connection to Briarwood or Blackmere. Record every object before it is moved. The constable dispatched 2 officers with the parish clerk as an independent witness. At 7, they returned, carrying a scorched iron chest. Inside it lay fragments of melted glass, burned medical papers, and the metal clasps from Lady Margaret's sewing box. Whatever the small black bottle had contained was gone. The parish clerk also delivered worse news. Frederick had found an unopened vial beneath the wagon. Its label carried Eleanor's handwriting and the words for Lady Margaret, 6 drops nightly. Beatrice claimed it was the poison that had killed Eleanor's mother. The constable placed it on the table. Eleanor recognized the bottle, but not the label. Her handwriting at 17 had been narrower and less controlled. The forger had copied her present hand onto a document supposedly written 8 years earlier. That can be shown, Nathaniel said, only if we have an authenticated example from that year. Beatrice had already removed or destroyed Eleanor's old letters. The constable examined the liquid. Until a physician tests this, the bottle strengthens the accusation against you. Tent, 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 tent. It did more than that. At 8, the magistrate issued a revised charge. Eleanor was no longer suspected only of killing Dr. Wren. She was now accused of poisoning her mother and murdering the physician who had discovered the truth. Beatrice had transformed 8 years of grief into a motive. Wren's false diagnosis could be portrayed as revenge. Eleanor killed the doctor because he knew she had inherited the same supposed illness that had made her mother dependent upon medicine. The story was cruel, simple, and believable. Truth was more complicated. That made it weaker in a crowded room. The hearing began at 9, inside Briarwood's Great Hall. Beatrice had moved it from the courthouse, arguing that the trustees needed access to the estate records. Frederick sat at the head of the long table, with the Fairmont keys beside his hand. Eleanor entered under guard. The guests who had witnessed her humiliation the previous morning returned to witness what they believed would be her ruin. Some regarded her with pity, others withdrew, as if guilt might be contagious. Mrs. Hargreaves was too weak to attend. Lady Catherine's carriage had not yet arrived from Bath. Eleanor's two most important witnesses were absent. Beatrice rose. She described herself as a grieving aunt, forced to protect Briarwood from a disturbed young woman. She presented Dr. Wren's ledger, Eleanor's missing cloak button, the sapphire earring, the vial found near the wagon, and the forged rent notices. The notices reveal Eleanor's desperation, Beatrice said. She attempted to turn the tenants against Frederick before he could expose her crimes. The false coachman had disappeared, allowing Beatrice to dismiss his failed testimony as the work of an unknown criminal. Then Nathaniel's former steward entered the hall. He carried the missing list from the still room. Nathaniel went rigid. The steward placed it before the magistrate and swore that Eleanor had offered him money to copy Blackmere's stationery. He claimed she had invented false diagnoses against noblewomen so that her own certificate would appear to be part of a conspiracy. The list had been altered. Catherine's initials were gone. In their place appeared the initials of women who had died unmarried, leaving no one present to contradict the record. Beatrice had not destroyed the evidence. She had improved it. The magistrate looked toward Eleanor. "What do you say to this? That the list presented is not the one Mr. Alderton and I found, but the document is written on paper, taken from the old still room. That proves where it came from, not what was originally written upon it." The magistrate sighed. Eleanor heard his patience weakening. Nathaniel stood. Eleanor had ordered him to testify only to facts he knew, and he honored that condition. "My former steward had access to my stationery, my archive, and my signature," he said. "I ignored repeated warnings that my private correspondence had been compromised." The steward smiled faintly. His Grace dismissed those warnings because Miss Fairmont could provide no proof. "That is true." Pon. The admission unsettled the room. Nathaniel continued. "I also received a forged letter in Eleanor's name. Rather than confront her, I chose to believe it because it appealed to my pride. Yesterday, I proposed publicly without learning how that act would affect her trust. My interference gave Frederick access to the carriage house before Wren's ledger appeared in her carriage." Frederick sprang to his feet. "You are accusing me. I am identifying the consequence of my own recklessness." Nathaniel then surrendered a packet of letters proving that his former steward had used confidential information to speculate in government contracts. Revealing them exposed years of negligence inside Blackmere's household and ended Nathaniel's hope of receiving the royal appointment. It was a costly truth, but it did not prove Eleanor innocent. Beatrice recognized that immediately. A duke's domestic embarrassment cannot erase a bottle labeled in Eleanor's own hand. The magistrate agreed. Unless Eleanor could produce direct evidence contradicting the poisoning allegation, the trustees would recognize Frederick's temporary control of Briarwood until the murder charges were resolved. Eleanor looked at the vial again. 6 drops nightly. The dose was written clearly enough for every witness to understand. Then she remembered the small black bottle described by Mrs. Hargreaves. If Beatrice had found it inside the sewing box, why had she carried it to the wagon before the hearing? Why burn the original, but preserve a different vial, conveniently labelled in Eleanor's handwriting? Because the original bottle could not support Beatrice's story, Eleanor's gaze shifted to the scorched metal clasps from the sewing box. One clasp was coated with pale blue residue, not dye, wax. Her mother's sewing box had contained a hidden compartment, sealed against moisture. If the black bottle broke inside the burning wagon, liquid might be gone, but vapor and residue could remain trapped beneath the wax coating. Eleanor asked the parish clerk, "Did anyone open the iron chest after it was removed from the wagon?" "No, the constable broke the lock here." The chain of custody remained intact. She no longer needed the bottle itself. She needed to make Beatrice reveal knowledge that only the person who had handled it could possess. Eleanor faced the magistrate. "I request that the hearing continue before the assembled tenants at noon. My aunt claims the eviction notices, my mother's death, and Dr. Wren's murder are unrelated. I will prove they are one scheme." Beatrice laughed. "With ashes?" With a question. Eleanor looked at the blue wax on the clasp. "And when you answer it, Aunt Beatrice, you will tell this room exactly what was inside the bottle you burned. By noon, More than 60 tenants had gathered inside Briarwood's Great Hall. Frederick objected to their presence, but the magistrate allowed them to remain. Their homes had been threatened by the disputed eviction notices, giving them a direct interest in the hearing. Eleanor entered without restraints. The constable had agreed that she posed no flight risk, though 2 officers remained near the doors. Before the proceedings resumed, she asked that every piece of evidence be placed on the long table, both medical certificates, Wren's appointment ledger, the vial allegedly written in her hand, the altered list, the clothes peg, the scraps of blue ribbon, and the scorched clasps recovered from the wagon. The constable recorded their positions. Eleanor then requested that Lady Margaret's sewing box be brought from the estate office. Frederick claimed it had been destroyed in the wagon fire. No, the parish clerk said. Only the iron chest and its contents were burned. I saw the sewing box in the office. Afterward, Frederick's face tightened. A constable retrieved it. The box was polished mahogany, decorated with a silver bird. Eleanor had touched countless times as a child. Its upper compartment contained needles, thread, and several faded ribbons. The hollow base had been forced open. It was empty. Eleanor did not accuse anyone. She began with the tenants. Each affected family presented its eviction notice. The parish clerk compared those notices with copies of Briarwood's genuine accounts. Miss Fairmont recorded labour credits in blue and produced payments in green, he explained. These notices convert every payment into unpaid currency. Could Eleanor have changed her own system? Beatrice asked. She could, the clerk replied, but the notices were prepared from totals copied before the final harvest credits were entered. They were created from figures available only inside the estate office. Frederick had gained access to that office after Nathaniel's public proposal. Eleanor placed one blue ribbon beside the notices. Samuel, tell the magistrate where you found this. The boy described the burned-handed coachman tying it to his family's gate before the eviction. 2 other tenants had seen the same man near their cottages. Eleanor laid the clothes peg beside the ribbon. This was found in the still room after my mother's medical papers disappeared. Both pieces contain the same salt and clove mixture once used by Briarwood's laundry. Beatrice leaned back. You have connected a ribbon to a laundry room. Nothing more. That is what I believed yesterday. Eleanor turned to the oldest laundry woman, Mrs. Pike. Why did my mother ask you to add salt to the blue dye? Mrs. Pike clasped her rough hands together. So we could identify cloth that had touched certain medicine bottles, Lady Margaret said. Some vapours left no colour, but could still cause illness. Who ordered 12 lengths of that ribbon during her final illness? Mrs. Beatrice. A murmur spread through the hall. Beatrice did not flinch. Lady Margaret was my sister. I helped manage her medicine. You told everyone she died of fever. She did. Then why were bottles containing dangerous vapours removed from her room? I followed Dr. Wren's instructions. Eleanor let the answer settle. Dr. Wren was not my mother's physician. He advised the household after her death. Yet you just said he instructed you to prepare the bottles during her illness. For the first time, Beatrice had contradicted herself before witnesses. Frederick rose. My mother is being confused by questions about events 8 years past. Then perhaps you can explain more recent events, Eleanor said. She asked the constable to bring in the new guard who had moved the false coachman during the fire. Under questioning, the man admitted that Frederick had paid him to deliver the transfer order. Frederick denied signing it. Eleanor did not argue over the handwriting. Instead, she produced the banknote found in the coachman's pocket. F.B. Final service upon confirmation, she read. We assumed those initials identified the person who made the payment. They do not. She placed Wren's false certificate beside it. The phrase refers to an event, Fairmont Briarwood transfer. The final service was to be completed once Frederick's control of the trust was confirmed. The constable disclosed that 3 more banknotes bearing the same notation had been found beneath the floorboards of the room where the coachman had been held. The guard lowered his head. Mr. Frederick told us the letters meant funds from the Briarwood estate. Frederick turned on him. You lying fool. The outburst was more revealing than another denial. Eleanor moved to Dr. Wren's appointment ledger. The first search of my carriage found nothing. The ledger appeared only after Frederick received the carriage house key. Inside it was my mother's sapphire earring. She opened the sewing box and removed its upper tray. A small velvet slot remained beside the silver thimble. My mother's earrings were stored here. My aunt controlled this box after her death. The jewel does not connect me to Dr. Wren, IK. It connects the person who possessed the box to the person who planted the ledger. Beatrice's composure began to fracture. You have produced suspicion, not proof of murder. Then let us discuss the alleged poison. The constable placed the vial before the magistrate. Eleanor displayed 2 authenticated letters she had written at 17, obtained that morning from the parish charity committee. Her younger handwriting differed visibly from the label. Nathaniel's former steward claimed she could have written it recently. Exactly, Eleanor said. The label is recent, the bottle is not. She asked the magistrate to inspect its stopper. The wax bore a faint impression of Wren's serpent seal, but the glass itself carried the mark of a London manufacturer established only 4 years earlier. The bottle could not have been used during Lady Margaret's illness 8 years ago. Beatrice called it an innocent mistake by whoever recovered the evidence. Who recovered it? Eleanor asked. Frederick said nothing. The parish clerk testified that Beatrice had personally lifted the vial from beneath the burned wagon before the constable arrived. Eleanor turned to her aunt. You preserved a false bottle that could implicate me, but you burned the genuine black bottle hidden by Mrs. Hargreaves. There was no black bottle. Then why did you move Lady Margaret's sewing box from the estate office to the wagon? I did not. Why does the scorched clasp from the iron chest fit the broken lock on this box? It does not. Eleanor placed the 2 pieces together. They aligned perfectly. The room fell silent. She then asked for a shallow silver dish and a candle. The scorched clasp was warmed gently above the flame. Blue wax softened along its underside, releasing a sharp odour that cut through the hall. Bitter almonds. The magistrate recoiled. Eleanor knew the smell from her mother's locked cabinet, but scent alone could be disputed. She needed the residue authenticated by someone whose knowledge Beatrice could not dismiss. At last, carriage wheels sounded outside. Lady Catherine entered carrying her infant daughter. Beside her walked Dr. Harcourt, physician to the royal household, and one of the few men qualified to identify the substance preserved beneath the wax. Nathaniel looked toward Eleanor but did not rise or claim credit. He had followed her conditions and brought a witness, not a rescue. Dr. Harcourt approached the table. Before examining the residue, he took one document from his case. It was Dr. Wren's private supply order, preserved in the records of the Royal College of Physicians. It showed that Wren had purchased the same rare poison 8 years earlier. The order named the person who paid for it. Dr. Harcourt broke the seal and looked directly at Beatrice. Shall I read the name aloud? Dr. Harcourt unfolded the supply order. The poison was purchased by Beatrice Fairmont. No one moved. Beatrice's face remained composed, but her hand closed around the back of her chair. That proves only that I paid an account for my sister's physician. Dr. Wren was not Lady Margaret's physician, Eleanor said. You admitted that yourself. Dr. Harcourt placed Wren's order beside the blue residue. The substance is concentrated bitter almond distillate. In small, repeated quantities, it produces headaches, weakness, confusion, and difficulty breathing. A larger dose can kill within minutes, while leaving symptoms easily mistaken for sudden fever or failure of the heart. The silence in the hall became absolute. Eleanor looked at the remains of her mother's sewing box. You marked the dangerous bottles with blue ribbon so the servants would not touch them. When my mother died, Mrs. Hargreaves hid one bottle with the medical papers. You spent 8 years searching for it. Beatrice lifted her chin. Your mother was already ill. She was preparing to remove you as my guardian. Eleanor produced a copy of Lady Margaret's final letter, preserved in the parish charity archive. Her mother had written it 2 days before her death, requesting that the trustees examine unexplained withdrawals from Eleanor's trust. Those payments had gone to Dr. Wren. Beatrice had poisoned her sister before the inquiry could begin. Wren then issued a false death certificate to disguise the symptoms. Years later, when Eleanor approached the age at which she could challenge Beatrice's control, the same physician created another certificate, declaring her incapable of bearing children. The diagnosis would transfer Briarwood to Frederick. Dr. Wren had eventually demanded more money and threatened to reveal the earlier murder. Beatrice sent the burned-handed coachman to silence him, then planted Wren's ledger, Lady Margaret's earring, and the false vial to frame Eleanor for both deaths. Frederick used the authority Nathaniel had accidentally placed in his hands to enter the carriage house, plant the ledger, clear the eastern cottages, and move the original bottle toward the abandoned road for destruction. Nathaniel's former steward had supplied Blackmere stationery, private information, and forged signatures. In return, Beatrice promised him money and control of several farms after Frederick inherited Briarwood. The former steward attempted to retreat toward the door. The constable's officers blocked him. Frederick pointed at his mother. She arranged everything. I only followed her instructions. Beatrice turned upon him with naked contempt. You enjoyed the money readily enough. Her words were not a confession, but they revealed the alliance between them. The false coachman was brought into the hall under guard. He had been captured before dawn while attempting to reach the northern road. Faced with the poison order, the payment notes, and the testimony of the hired guard, he admitted killing Wren on Beatrice's instructions. He also confessed that Frederick had given him Eleanor's cloak and removed the silver button himself. The magistrate ordered Beatrice arrested for the murders of Lady Margaret and Dr. Wren, conspiracy against Eleanor, destruction of evidence, and attempted murder through the stillroom fire. Frederick was taken into custody for forgery, evidence tampering, unlawful evictions, and participation in the conspiracy. Nathaniel's former steward was arrested for fraud, theft, and assisting the plot. As the constable approached, Beatrice looked at Eleanor. I fed you, clothed you, preserved this estate when your mother would have given it away to tenants and beggars. You preserved nothing, Eleanor answered. You kept what you believed no one could take from you. The restraints closed around Beatrice's wrists. That morning, Eleanor had entered the hall as the prisoner. Now her aunt left it in irons. The magistrate dismissed every accusation against Eleanor and ordered the public record corrected. The trustees cancelled Frederick's authority, restored the evicted families to their homes, and recognized Eleanor as the lawful beneficiary of Briarwood. Eleanor refused to let the household celebrate until each family received written protection against another unlawful removal. Nathaniel stood before the tenants without his ducal coat or ceremonial authority. I wronged Miss Fairmont before any forged evidence reached the magistrate, he said. She warned me that my household had been compromised, and I chose pride over investigation. When I discovered the false letter, I rode here believing one dramatic gesture could repair my distrust. My public proposal instead gave her enemies the access they needed to place evidence in her carriage. He did not ask Eleanor to forgive him. He announced that the farms his steward had purchased through fraud would be transferred into a trust supporting the displaced Briarwood tenants. He surrendered his royal appointment permanently and opened Blackmere's correspondence to an independent audit. Then he turned to Eleanor. The offer I made in this hall is withdrawn. A faint shock crossed the faces around them. Nathaniel continued, It was made without asking what you wanted. If I ever speak of courtship again, it will be because you have invited the question. For the first time, he placed the choice entirely in her hands. Eleanor did not reward one truthful speech with immediate forgiveness. She spent the following months rebuilding Briarwood's accounts, restoring the eastern cottages, and establishing an infirmary in her mother's name. Lady Catherine became its first patron, while Mrs. Hargreaves, her shoulder, healing slowly, accepted the position of household superintendent on terms she negotiated herself. Nathaniel wrote once each month. His letters contained no declarations of love and no requests for an answer. He reported what he had repaired, which families had been compensated, and which powers he had surrendered. Eleanor read every letter, but answered none until winter. Her first reply contained only one sentence. You may visit Briarwood on Thursday, provided you come without an announcement prepared. Nathaniel arrived after sunrise, rather than riding dramatically through the night. He came alone. Eleanor met him in the same drawing room where Aunt Beatrice had once declared that no gentleman would ever want her. The forged certificate was gone. In its place stood the charter for Lady Margaret's infirmary, signed by the tenants, trustees, and physicians who would govern it together. Nathaniel bowed. I came to ask whether you would walk with me. Eleanor studied the man who had once mistaken possession for protection and regret for redemption. He had not yet earned back her trust, but at last he understood that it could not be seized through rank, urgency, or sacrifice. She took her gloves from the table. One walk, she said, nothing more. His expression softened. Nothing more than you choose. Eleanor opened the door herself. Months earlier, Nathaniel had ridden through darkness, believing he would rescue a rejected woman by asking her to become his duchess. Now, he followed her into the morning, knowing that if she ever chose him, it would not be because no other gentleman wanted her. It would be because she was free, and because he had finally learned to deserve the privilege of walking beside her